My colleague
Go.
just joined as an attendee. Ariel B should be on the attendee list. If you can just promote her to
Sure, I'll move her over. Patrick, you're recording and good to go.
Great, thanks. Welcome everybody to the December 2022 meeting of Manhattan Community Board 1's Land Use, Zoning, and Economic Development Committee. I'm Patrick Cannell, chair of the committee. With me is Laura Starr, our vice chair, or co-chair rather, and Lucian Reynolds, who is our district manager and is helping us out on the committee. We have one item on the agenda tonight. It is a preview, I stress the word preview, of the city's zero carbon text amendment. We're going to be getting a citywide zoning text amendment at some point. We'll learn tonight what that point will be. And we're going to hear from our friends at the Department of City Planning, including Jasmine and her colleague Ariel. We're going to walk us through at a reasonably high level what the purpose and plan and timing is for this. But I stress that this is a preview because we are going to have more times to visit with DCP and which I assume will be the applicant over this issue and over the text amendment. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jasmine and let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's great to see everyone. So for those who don't know me or haven't met me yet, my name is Jasmine Tapale. I'm from the Department of City Planning and I go by she, her pronouns. So I'm the borough liaison for Manhattan Community Board 1. And I also have Ariel B, who's also another planner from the Manhattan office, and she's actually going to be presenting the City of Yes initiatives with a focus on zero carbon. So I just wanted to quickly note that, like Patrick just mentioned, those three initiatives that we're going to be talking about tonight haven't been filed yet. So they're still being shaped and created right now. So the information we're going to be sharing tonight is that research that a core team at our agency has been doing. Ariel and I don't have that expertise on these initiatives like that team does, so we're happy to take any comments, concerns, or questions back to that team to help guide their research. But just wanted to let everyone know that there's also going to be more info sessions and more opportunities in the new year, specifically one that's coming up in like early first quarter, so like February, March, to give updates on the research that they're doing, and then also to give everyone the opportunity to ask more detailed questions. So now I'll pass it on to Ariel, who's going to introduce these three initiatives. If you can just give me 1 second, I'm going to share my screen and then we can get started. There we go. If someone can just quickly let me know if you're able to see my screen.
We can see it.
Awesome, thank you very much. Let me just put it in full screen and we can get started.
One quick question.
Yeah,
You'll
go for
be
it.
explaining the schedule for when these will be proposed and eventually submitted and voted on. Is that correct?
Yes, we do have a slide specific to the schedule, so we'll
Great,
have that
thank you.
information. Awesome. Okay, Ariel, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. It's really nice to meet everyone virtually for the first time. So my name is Ariel, and I'm a planner on the West Side team in the Manhattan office. And tonight I'll be presenting our City of Yes initiatives. So in October, we hold 2 virtual public info sessions. So for those who are able to attend, some of this information may sound familiar. We'll have a time at the end of the presentation for questions to bring back to our team, and we'll be following up with answers to your questions. Next slide, please. So in June, Mayor Adams announced the City of Yes initiative. These proposals would use the city's zoning tools to support economic recovery, expand housing opportunities in every neighborhood, and accelerate the transition to a greener energy future. And since then, DCP has been analyzing the zoning resolution to identify rules that might be barriers to a city's progress. We would like to emphasize that the details of these proposals that I'm presenting today are yet to be determined, and we're very much focused on public engagement and connecting with community leaders, community boards, and elected officials. And we really look forward to continuing these conversations and hearing your ideas on how to shape these proposals. Next slide. So the three proposals included in the City of Yes initiative are zoning for carbon neutrality, which would seek to support citywide carbon reduction and the broad reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by enabling clean energy and other sustainable practices, primarily in our buildings. Zoning for economic opportunity, which would provide local businesses with the ability to repurpose vacant spaces by removing outdated limitations that are keeping the spaces from getting filled. And lastly, zoning for housing opportunity, which would encourage the creation of more housing in neighborhoods across the city, including by allowing additional housing types, easing conversions, and reducing parking requirements. Next slide. And currently, DCP is actively conducting research and shaping all three proposals through continued engagement with experts in the field, local groups, and communities. So we hold our first round of public info sessions in October, as I just mentioned, and we'll be hosting another round of info sessions in March next year to discuss updates to our work on all three proposals. And DCP estimates that zoning for carbon neutrality will be filed and referred out around spring 2023, followed by a zoning for economic development around fall 2023, and lastly, zoning for housing opportunity around the beginning of 2024. Next slide. So first up, I'm going to discuss zoning for carbon neutrality. This proposal looks at how zoning can support our city's climate goals, specifically achieving carbon neutrality and broadly reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. So why carbon? As we know, we're facing a climate crisis largely fueled by carbon dioxide emissions, which come from burning fossil fuels. And in 2016, the world joined together to sign the Paris Agreement, a vision to curtail greenhouse gas emissions to limit overall global warming to 2 degrees Celsius and thus prevent further environmental damage associated with climate change. And here in New York City, we've been implementing this vision through a number of initiatives under the umbrella of achieving carbon neutrality by reducing the city's emissions by 80% by 2050, or 80/50 for short. Next slide. And so what do we mean by carbon neutral city? It's a city that focuses on reducing operational carbon emissions in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement. It's a city where we are reducing our overall energy needs by retrofitting almost every building in the city to become highly efficient. It's a city where we're cleaning the grid by switching from a fossil fuel powered electricity to renewables like solar and wind. And lastly, a city where we are electrifying all remaining energy needs, and that includes our vehicles and our buildings as well. And as you can see from the graph on the right, the key driver for our city's carbon emissions by far is our building sector. And there's a significant relationship between how our buildings function and the zoning laws that govern them. Next slide. And when it comes to our research, we're building on a strong foundation. 10 years ago, the department issued Zone Green, which is the first comprehensive overhaul of our zoning to support emerging green technologies like rooftop wind and solar. And the current initiative is a chance to revisit Zone Green after 10 years, to update it and to adjust in light of many of the technological and legal changes since. And these changes include, since 2016, the focus on decarbonization coming from the Paris Agreement and 80/50. They also include issues exemplified in this report from the Urban Green Council called Zone Greener. And lastly, they also include updates to zoning to reflect the Climate Mobilization Act at the city level, especially Local Law 97, which would impose strict fines on large buildings which do not reduce their carbon emissions, as well as the CLCPA at the state level, which in particular set ambitious solar and energy storage goals for the city. Next slide. And this leads us to our proposal, zoning for carbon neutrality. As a citywide text amendment, it would have the ability to positively affect every zoning district type across the city. So we're focused mainly on removing obstacles. There are many challenges that home and building owners are facing in response to our climate emergency, and we're analyzing our zoning regulations to ensure that zoning isn't one of the things holding people back. And to a lesser extent, we're also taking a look at incentives, in particular, existing incentives to make sure that they continue to work into the future. For example, aligning existing incentives with the way the new New York City Energy Code works and will work in successive updates in the future. And finally, we're taking a close look at solar and energy storage in response to the city's and state's ambitious goals for these technologies along time horizons are sooner than 2050. For instance, New York City's goal to have 1,000 megawatts of solar installed by 2030. And our current estimates are that we have around 300 megawatts installed as of now. Next slide. And zoning for carbon neutrality would focus on fixing impediments in 4 key areas. These are also the 4 key categories from our city's 80/50 roadmap. And these key areas are supporting renewable energy grid and energy storage, building retrofits, growth of electric vehicles and micromobility, and lastly, reduction of solid waste and stormwater output. And to give you a sense of the issues that we're looking at, I'll show you 5 key examples of the type of problems. Next slide. So the first example has to do with rooftop solar. In 2012, Zone Green created new rules to allow rooftop solar. This initiative had limitations to the heights of the panels, the height and setback from the facade, and rooftop coverage caps, and the intent was to keep the solar insulation small and unobtrusive. However, since 2012, the climate emergency has grown, and we realized the need to get as much solar installed on the rooftops as possible. And with our current zoning rules, the result is that only a small portion of the rooftop can be used for an elevated solar canopy. And to illustrate this, in this diagram of a typical mid-density building rooftop, the orange tinted portions of the solar canopy would not be permitted under current zoning regulations. Only the portion outlined in green would be allowed. And at scale, across thousands of buildings, this limitation would hold our city back from meeting our solar goals. Next slide. The next example pertains to energy storage, essentially big batteries. So energy storage systems, also known as ESS, are key components of a clean energy grid. They save energy generated by the sun and the wind for times of peak demand, such as a hot summer day when millions of New Yorkers need AC to stay cool. And ESS would not only be needed at grid-owned sites, but also at the point of consumption, embedded in our city's neighborhoods. And yet, energy storage is not addressed in our zoning text. There is a special permit from the Board of Standards and Appeals, also known as BSA, but this process has been used by very few. It takes multiple years and can stymie the rollout of this urgently needed technology. And DCEP has been and will continue to work with the partners at DOB and FDNY to explore safe and appropriate as-of-right allowances to support the broad adoption of energy storage across the city. Next slide. The third example has to do with building retrofits. So basically, every one of our city's million buildings will need to be retrofitted for efficiency and electrification. And currently, zoning is a barrier to many building owners interested in retrofitting. What's shown here is an example of a building reclad, which is replacing of the building facade. This provides opportunities for improvements in energy efficiency. But if a typical mid-century office building removes a thin curtain wall to replace it with a thick high-performance wall, it runs into a problem, which is that zoning considers wall thickness part of the building's FAR, or floor area ratio. And if your building was built to this maximum FAR, as is generally the case, then replacing your current wall with a thicker one would increase your FAR, which is not allowed. And this prohibition stops the retrofit dead in its tracks. And this is an example, among many, of small technical glitches that we're cataloging and planning to resolve as a part of our work. Next slide. And next, we'll discuss the transportation sector. So we know that New York City is lagging when it comes to EV adoption. A fraction of 1% of the nearly 2 million private vehicles registered in New York City are zero emission. There are many hurdles to EV adoption, including cost, supply chain, and federal policy. And zoning may not be the biggest issue, but we believe that there are barriers that are created through zoning to expand EV. For example, one of the biggest challenges to owning an EV is finding an off-street parking space to charge the car overnight. So on-street charging is regulated by DOT, and DCP zoning rules regulate off-street parking. And two ways that zoning can expand options for EV charging are, first, allowing freestanding electric gas stations in a wide range of zoning districts across the city. This is currently not allowed in many zoning districts. And second, allowing building owners to permit the general public to use their EV charging infrastructure. So currently, zoning allows EV charging to be added to existing parking facilities as an accessory use, but for example, if the space is in a residential building, zoning only allows the residents of the building to use the EV charging. And DCP is looking at expanding this rule so that EV owners in the community can benefit from EV charging in residential buildings. Next slide. And lastly, we'll discuss solid waste and stormwater management. So our waste stream is a relatively small part of our city's carbon footprint, and it has some straightforward solutions. For example, when stormwater flows into a combined sewer system, it is directed to our city's stormwater treatment plants where it must be cleaned before returning to the environment. And yet this water could instead be retained on site. And one way to do that is through the use of bioswales or rain gardens, which would absorb extra stormwater and release it over time. And now zoning requires street trees to be installed along the sidewalk whenever a new development or enlargement occurs. And zoning specifies that these street trees need to be installed in a standard tree pit. But there's an opportunity to update these rules to allow for other designs, such as rain gardens, designed by DOT and DEP, as depicted here on the slide, to be used as well. Next slide. And that concludes my discussion of the zoning for carbon neutrality proposal. And now I'm just going to briefly discuss the two other proposals as discussing this complete package of the City of Yes initiative. So this is the zoning for economic opportunity proposal. And this aims to make it easier to locate or grow a business in New York City. The proposal also takes aim at our storefront vacancy crisis by modernizing the city's zoning, allowing a wider variety of activities that would create vibrancy on our commercial streets, and lowering the cost and time of starting a new business. Next slide. Our goals for this proposal are to support economic recovery and resiliency by allowing existing space to be repurposed to support economic activity, to modify rules to help create flexible new spaces that meets the needs of businesses, and to support the growth of job centers in transit accessible areas across the 5 boroughs to bring jobs closer to New Yorkers. And we'll discuss an example to demonstrate the type of challenge we're trying to address and the opportunities we see. Next slide. So in this example, we have a community member who is concerned about the impact that dark stores, such as the 15-minute grocery delivery company, are having on their neighborhood. And zoning does have ground floor design requirements in some locations, but the rules change from neighborhood to neighborhood and they don't apply in this area. And we're trying to strike a balance between consistent and clear rules that don't place a new financial or regulatory burden on small businesses. Next slide. And now I'm going to briefly discuss our initial research on the zoning for housing opportunity proposal. Next slide. Our goals for this initiative, this proposal, is to build on where we live, which was New York City's plan to further fair housing and address the human costs of housing shortage. And similar to how we have been working on the other two proposals, DCP has been analyzing the zoning text to see where the rules have been restrictive to the development of housing. And we want to ensure that all neighborhoods can add a variety of housing, low, medium, and high density districts. Next slide. So some of the changes that the teams are analyzing for medium to higher density neighborhoods include allowing housing types such as ADUs, smaller units and shared housing, easing conversions of underutilized buildings to housing, reducing or eliminating unnecessary parking requirements to unlock housing potential, finding ways to give all supportive and affordable housing the same incentives as affordable senior housing, and lastly, making it easier for owners of homes and small buildings to alter their buildings over time. Next slide. And in this example, we have a one-story church in Bushwick, Brooklyn. The church wants to partner with a nonprofit or housing developer to build a new church with housing on top. And today, the church will be limited to around 35 units. If they decide to provide affordable senior housing, the church can add an additional 10 to 12 units. And we're looking into expanding the preferences given to affordable senior housing to all affordable and supportive housing. And this would give this church, in this example, the opportunity to add more permanently affordable housing. Next slide. Thank you. This concludes my presentation, and we're happy to collect any questions you may have and bring them back to our team.
Okay. Thank you both so much. Ariel, that was really helpful, and I think just the right level of detailed information. We're going to go through our committee members. I see we have two members of the public here. Committee members will go through first, and then if we have any members of the public who want to ask questions, we'll come back to that as well. So I'm going to go Colin, then Gerald, then Paul Goldstein. Lucian, I do see your hand up, but I'm just going to ask if the committee members can go first, unless you have sort of an orienting question.
Thanks, Patrick, and thanks for this presentation. I'm really encouraged to see it. Disclosure, I actually work in renewables, and big cities are often really tough to deploy renewables and to keep net zero. So these are all a good start. One really quick question though, until this point, FDNY has actually banned energy storage within facilities because of a threat of fire, particularly with lithium batteries. That seems to be one pretty big obstacle. How would you plan to get around that?
Thank you so much for that question. And that's a really great point that I think the team has really had their thumb on already. And they've already been engaging with FDNY, so I think they're working through that right now to kind of develop or hopefully create a plan on how to mitigate that.
Just one quick follow-up is, would there be a preference for different kinds of batteries, like flow batteries or non-lithium based batteries?
That I'm not entirely sure, but can you talk a little bit more about that so I can bring that back to our team and that may be something they can expand on?
I don't think anyone here wants to hear me do that, but I can definitely do that offline.
Sure, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Colin. Gerald, then Paul Goldstein, and then Joe Lerner, Rosa Chang, Jason Friedman. I'm sorry, Alice Blankton, Jason Friedman, and Vicky Cameron. Wow, we got a lot of questions. Okay. Colin, if you don't mind taking your hand down. Gerald, Paul, and Joe.
Thanks, Patrick. And thanks, Ariel and Jasmine. Great presentation. Regarding carbon neutrality, how is the city taking leadership with their own buildings in some of these initiatives? For example, between, I would say, public schools and NYCHA buildings, there must be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of roof that could be used for solar, as well as things like roof gardens, which I guess would also help with the stormwater initiatives. And that would be my second question: is the team looking at roof gardens and zoning and for those as part of the stormwater solutions as well?
Yeah, I think that's already been studied, the idea of like what has the city been doing with their own city stock. I can actually give that information to Lucian and the team to relay that back to you, because I think one of the studies that Ariel had showed had outlined kind of their plan, their ongoing plan of what they've already done with like their own building stocks. And then to your second question about the rooftop gardens and zoning, that is something I'll bring back to our team to see if that's something they're researching or something they can kind of add on to like as part of their research in terms of that stormwater management also. So thank you.
Yeah, I do believe that they're looking into the rooftop gardens, but we can also, we will follow up with
Confirm.
you with
Yeah.
more details on that.
Okay, I just want to mention too, in terms of rooftop gardens, I mean, they're, the city public schools, there's one that I can think of in particular, I believe it's PS, is it 41 in the West Village? They have been monitoring their rooftop garden since they installed it many years ago. I think it's been 10 years at least. They raised half the funds themselves. It's reduced their energy consumption by half, I believe. And then for whatever reason, they're in need of a new roof in certain areas, and so the city's basically going in, tearing it up without a plan to restore it when it's done. So, I would just suggest that that planning, reach out to existing and successful projects and find out what the needs are and long-term, goals, etc.
Yeah, thank you for that example. That's really helpful for us, especially having the team like directed at certain projects and examples.
Yeah,
Thank you
like,
so
if
much.
you want, I'm happy to provide a contact information for the team leader or team teacher who was responsible for that. It's Vicky Sandos, and she is now consulting in regards to rooftop gardens, but she was instrumental for getting that particular rooftop garden up and running. And the last thing I'll say about this is what it does is it provides, of course, especially during the pandemic, but at other times, it also provides very secure outdoor space for classes. I mean, it's on top of a roof, so you can't get any more
Mm.
secure than that. Plus, it doesn't take from the recess area. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you so much for giving us that example. And also, if you could share that information, that'd be really great because I know that team is continuously trying to find new groups, new individuals to kind of engage with this process.
Thanks. And if you could please get the other information to Lucian, that would be
Yeah,
great.
will
Appreciate it.
do.
Thanks, Gerald. Paul Goldstein, Joe Lerner, then Rosa Chang.
Okay, thank you. So I observed that many of these suggested changes involve allowing buildings to be larger. Have you done an assessment of what percentage change would be allowed for buildings? Would they be 5% larger, 10%? Do you have any assessment of that? And the second part to that question would be, would those allowances be allowed in all areas of the city, including, for example, a historic district where size of buildings is particularly important? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll work my way backwards and just talking about kind of like those allowances, if they're going to be allowed in like the entire city or like maybe they might still be kind of restricted in landmark areas. I know all the teams are working with LPC on these initiatives because even though they are citywide initiatives and should touch every part of the city, they do recognize that, you know, landmark areas are they do have restrictions. So I know they are working diligently with LPC. So they do have that expertise from LPC to know that like maybe some of these things can occur in those neighborhoods. So they are researching that. I think for your first question about the buildings being larger, I think we can definitely take that comment back to the team. I know, for example, like the carbon neutrality items, it's really about like giving buildings the ability to like retrofit. So like the recladding is like um, kind of fixing that exterior wall to have like a better building performance. It would make the wall thicker. But I know in other areas they're still researching kind of like what you're saying about like these assessments. So there's no set guarantee that like buildings are going to get bigger. We still don't know yet, but it's definitely a concern I can bring back. And if, I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to add about that concern, so I can also bring that back to the team.
Well, you gave the example of that Bushwick site adding
Mm.
10 to 12 units.
Mhm.
So that was for a very low scale site. So in an area like Lower Manhattan, where we have much higher FARs, would that allow that many more units to be built on a site and the building to be that much larger?
Got it. Thank you so much for elaborating on that. I can bring that back to specifically the housing team just to kind of see what they're thinking about because they're, if anything, the housing team is definitely a lot more in like the initial stages more than the other two proposals.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Paul. Joe Lerner, then Rosa Chang, then Jason Friedman.
When could we expect some results that we can see with our eyes on any one of your projects?
So are you, just to clarify, are you talking specifically about these three initiatives or?
Yes, what
Okay.
your based upon your presentation today, which I loved. I didn't have enough time to copy everything I wanted to, but yes,
We can send a copy of this, by the way, so that everyone can have like a copy of it.
that would
Please
be
do.
good.
Yeah.
Sure.
But when can we expect something solid that we could bite our teeth into, so to speak?
Right. Yeah, so I think earlier Ariel showed a timeline of when we expect to, well, when we estimate to like file these applications. So when we, as Department of City Planning, say we're going to file them, that's when like the application becomes like real and becomes public. So for zoning for zero carbon, we think that that's going to get filed and ready, to show to everyone like the nitty gritty details in spring of next year. So it's coming up.
Let me interrupt. I
Yeah.
understand that. I saw the timeline, but the
Mhm.
timeline is for filing something. I want to know when you will do something about things in the filings.
Oh, like the actual initiatives, like when those are gonna.
Yes, so I can
Like,
see
when will the
it,
market
and
respond
so
to the
I can
zoning?
applaud the city for doing something.
That's hard to say, honestly. I don't think I have an answer to that.
You,
I do
you,
know that. Oh, yeah, sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you.
you understand, every administration comes with these glorified plans,
Mhm.
and we sit back waiting for them to happen, and some of them don't happen.
I think that's a great point. And I think the only thing that I can say to that, like right now, is that one thing that we're hoping to do with, like, for example, zoning for zero carbon is just to be able to give anybody, developers, maybe community groups, at least the ability to do it. So by taking down a lot of like the restrictions right now that we have, like, for example, something like composting, which doesn't even exist in our zoning in the future, if someone wants to, add a community composting, something like that to their like, I don't know, local community garden or something like that, they would have the ability to do that. So it really depends on the market right now. But at least they'll have the ability to do it with our changes.
Okay, I'll give my fellow board members a chance. I'll sign off now.
No worries.
Thanks, Joe. It's a good question, though.
Mhm.
Rosa, then Jason, then Alice, please.
Hi, thank you very much. Sorry, I'm trying to start my video, but okay, there I am. And I don't know why my hand is green. It's awesome.
We're all
So-
green. It's really weird. You've all
That's
turned into
the-
frogs.
The whole
It's
interface has
amazing.
changed. I'm very, very confused. Hi, Jasmine and Ariel. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm interested in all of this stuff and a little geeky about it, so please excuse me. So number one is for solar and battery storage. I'm wondering what are the changes going to be? Because I know that like for my own building, which is a condo with over 400 units, we actually did look at emergency sort of power storage options and photovoltaics and all of that stuff, mostly just from a life safety point of view, given, you know, with Hurricane Sandy and, you know, the fact that our building is like 40 stories and you know, and we do have some elderly residents in our building and we're concerned. And the cost was prohibitive. And it basically just made it impossible to even consider going forward. We would love to be more environmentally friendly and be able to integrate photovoltaics and do battery storage on the roof and all of that. But it was impossible.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know more specifically how the changes that you are speaking of would impact the possibility of, you know, a variety of buildings, whether they be commercial or residential, to be able to start integrating these systems. So that's number one. I'm just going to go through them all and then you can answer. The other one is that we have found that in Lower Manhattan, because of the sheer density of the services, the infrastructure that we have just like layered all over itself in a mishmash under our streets and our sidewalks, we can't actually integrate, or we have enormous difficulty integrating bioswales or rain gardens of any sort in Lower Manhattan. In fact, I think that we asked for them and we were told bluntly, no, it's too expensive where you are. So we're putting them in Queens or something along those lines. And so while that's really nice for us, that's not a real possibility. And so I'm wondering if there's any way, now I'm on this kick of like multi-use planters, whether or not we can integrate, you know, above grade planters to be able to work with something like the Million Trees Initiative and to be able to have some benefit in that regard. I guess number three, I totally applaud getting rid of the parking requirements in buildings, because if you have a choice between people and empty vehicles, I'm always going to choose people that need a home. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is for the affordable housing requirements, I really applaud you guys making sure that that gets to be a little bit more flexible. I understand why it was so restrictive to begin with, but I think that if you look at the requirements for, let's say, room sizes or the locations of rooms or the sequence of accessing rooms or all of those various things, I mean, they're so restrictive compared to market rate that there's just so many hurdles that it makes it really, it disincentivizes sometimes the creation of that space and so I would love to see that become a little bit more flexible to respond to the enormous demand that we have for affordable housing in the city, in all neighborhoods, including ours, especially ours. And I think that's it for now. I mean, and I personally think it would be awesome to be able to regulate some sort of, let's see, mixed sort of scale of affordability within buildings. And I don't know if that's something that you guys are contemplating in your plan, but I would just toss that out there because it's something that, you know, I believe passionately about. And then now I'm going to shut up and let you speak. Thank you.
No worries. That was actually really great. Thank you so much for giving us such a like a range of like ideas and comments and questions. I think that's incredible. But I did write them all down, so I'm going to respond to each one. So your first one regarding solar and battery storage. I think you had mentioned like, what were those exact like changes going on? Because you do live in a condo with over 400 units, and you and your other fellow residents were looking into this. So we don't have the exact details yet because they're still researching exactly what it is and kind of looking at those really nitty-gritty details. But what we can say about it, though, in a broader sense, is that like there's a lot of policy that's going to need to go into it, especially with the affordability portion. Ideally, everyone should have access to that renewable energy sources and not just people who have the funds for it. But what we're hoping with at least our zoning changes is to give everyone the ability that if they had the access to it, to at least be able to actually put solar energy or battery storage in their, respective buildings or sites or wherever, commercial or residential. Because even right now, the people who do have the funds for it still find our zoning overly restrictive for it. So that's number one. But it is a good point to take back to our team because not only thinking about the nitty-gritty zoning technical details, it's also a great point in like policy in general about like making sure that what we're doing is also aligned with like the greater sense of like New York City policy and on renewable energy. So definitely point taken about the affordability portion. So number two, just kind of talking about the bioswales and like rain gardens specific to Lower Manhattan. That I'm not 100% sure. Like I know they're talking about because these are citywide initiatives, kind of the different densities in like our New York City, which ranges completely from like these low 1 to 2 family homes all the way to obviously Lower Manhattan, one of the densest areas in the city. So it is a point that I will take back to them to kind of learn more about what they're researching, specifically in those higher dense areas that almost can't take the capacity of bioswales and what they're thinking through that. I think that's a really important point. So I'll bring that back to them. And then I think number three, I think you just made a comment about the parking requirements in buildings. I will also let the housing team know about the affordable housing requirements because that is basically in line what they're thinking about having that flexibility because as we all know, it doesn't need to be said again, but we're in a housing crisis. We need to find more ways to add, especially permanently affordable housing. So yeah, I will bring all that back. Thank you so much for that, for those comments, questions.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rosa. So the order keeps changing here, but why don't we go Alice, then Jason, then Vicky?
Thanks, Patrick, and thanks, Jasmine. Nice to see you. Whoops, sorry. A couple of questions, just really all fascinating stuff. I know it's just at the beginning, but I'm curious about, and I think I mentioned this once before with you, where is the city is in terms of looking at a mechanism, whether it's through a zoning text amendment or legislation that looks at the sort of assessing the carbon footprint of any project, let's say a public project, as part of the cost benefit analysis. In other words, as sort of required. Will there be a way to assess the benefit of a demolition or a readapting of an existing building is somehow better than the construction of a new one? And this comes up very specifically in our neighborhoods, as you know, with the demolition of Wagner Park, with the demolition of the borough-based jails. We never really are entitled to see as the public, how are these considerations really being mapped out and quantified? So, is there some consideration given that developers will be required to show this? And if not, it's something that I think, I would like to advocate for. I think it would be an extraordinarily important part of any of the City of Yes package. It was, of course, in assessing how much, the urgency of affordable housing is, is pitted up against the urgency of climate sensitive projects. And this is always going to be a balance that has to be struck more now than ever. We'll see it out on Governor's Island, of course, a great deal. So how do we make, not in terms of housing, but just in terms of these newer areas that will come to us that will have to forge a balance, and how will we really assess that? So that's my question. Is there anything that's happening now with an assessment and a requirement?
Thank you, Allison. I do remember you mentioning that to me also, like during Governor's Island. Yeah, I think that's a great point about kind of making sure that we're holding developers accountable for the carbon that they're producing. It's definitely something that I'll bring back to the carbon neutral team because I'm not 100% sure if they've had conversations around that and if they have, what progress they've made. But I'll make sure to get that back to them and maybe we can talk more in the future about it.
Thanks a lot. That would be
Sure.
terrific. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Alice. Jason, Vicky, then Tammy, please.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
can.
wonderful. I just had a couple questions. One was, is part of this, or can you guys also look into some initiatives relating to the conversion of like Class B and C office buildings, which we have a lot of in our neighborhood, which many people say are dead as office buildings? And then two, when do you guys typically like spitball with DOE, for example, initiatives are aligned with whatever changes in the code that would have to accompany any of this stuff?
Yeah, you cut off a little bit at the end, so I just want to make sure I got your question. Were you just asking like what kind of connection we have with DOB when it comes to our initiatives, just to make sure we're both aligned?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
That
perfect.
kind of, you know, where in the process does that typically start happening to make sure that there's good coordination between the laws that they're going to have to make in tandem with your new zoning changes?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because with our zoning changes, DOB is the ones enforcing it. So basically, we've been having regular meetings with DOB to kind of go over these issues and make sure that like whatever rules that we're proposing in our zoning text is aligned with how they're going to end up enforcing these rules. So it's a strong connection between DCP and DOB, and we are having those regular conversations with them like right now, and it has been ongoing for a while now. And then also to answer your previous question about Class B and Class C office spaces, they are doing research right now into those spaces. So it is pretty initial stuff going, thinking through like our housing, specific to our housing tax amendment. So I know they are doing research. It hasn't gone far yet, but it is a topic that they're looking through right now.
Thanks, Jasmine. Thanks, Jason. Good questions, particularly on the Class B. Vicky, then Tammy, then Michael Kramer, and then Laura.
Thank you, Patrick. I have mostly a comment. I want to give you a heads up. As an architect, I work on high-rise buildings, and as you can tell, as you know, we have dozens and dozens of consultants, and we go after Gold LEED and many of the sustainable systems. And what we're finding out, just to give you a heads up, is that we come back about 6 months later and the building management doesn't understand anything about what the owner and the consultants have provided. And the building is running at 150% of its energy. And so not only do we now need to learn that some kind of enforcement has to be done at like a basic level where, you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe we need to have a list of items that we need to review. But I'm telling you, as a heads up, all that work gets done, and 6 months later, none of it is being followed, not because they don't want to, they just don't understand. And that is a reality of our city at the moment. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Vicky. That's really helpful because I think, you know, there's always two sides to it. If it's all this, you know, our bigger like zoning text, but then there's also what actually the reality of what happens on the ground. So that's really helpful to hear that side also.
Yeah, just small things, right?
Right.
Human error is our
Right.
biggest enemy of all time. And so I think that somewhere when we do these changes, I think we have to think about it to the very last minute. How is this going to be enforced over long term, or over long periods of time? As I said, no one does this on purpose. They just don't understand.
That's fair. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. Tammy, then Michael Kramer, then Laura, please.
Don't forget Lucian as well, because his hand was up. I wondered, hey, Jasmine, thanks for coming. And thank you, Ariel, for the presentation. It was really great. Very, very considerate and thrilled that you are here early. And one question, of course, is will we have another bite at the apple before, with all the answers that you give, before a final thing comes out? That's 1 out of 3 questions.
Yeah. So the answer is yes. They are planning on doing another like larger info session to have like kind of that core team that's working on this project. So they're like those subject matter experts that you can grill and ask as many questions as you want.
Great.
So I expect all of you to be now.
Yeah, we will be. Don't worry. We'll be there. Well, we hope that they come to CB1. One of the things I do want to note that does seem in a city of yes, one of the things that we noticed is there's so much saying of yes, but somehow for much of the same thing, same real estate, different use. So I use it as a point of noting that for accessory parking, for example, we just opined in transportation and have a resolution this month about the utilization to reduce climate change effects from last mile delivery to allow changes to accessory use parking to be able to use for last mile delivery, cargo bikes and things like that through a variety of different parking methods for any additional opportunities that they have. That does seem to be a competitive use to this necessarily when we're talking about the housing usage within this. So I do have concerns about saying yes to being able to use for 5,432 things and not actually getting the thing that would be necessarily the best for the public realm, but more for the best for financial benefit for said, etc. You know, we learned that I think hindsight being 2020 from the Water Street Text Amendment, we would have significantly changed our feedback and whether or not we approved it based on what we see now, just as an example,
Yeah.
because the loss of the public space did not make up for what we're getting in any stroke. So that also then brings me to perhaps one of our long favorite conversations with DCP and DOT is open restaurant programs in the sheds, which then comes back to the conversations about unique to Community Board 1 in the historic street grid, where you can't necessarily put a bioswale on a sidewalk, but maybe it could have been done in the parking lane leading up to the drainage instead of putting a sidewalk shed. And so there it is a choice of competitive use, again, of public space in the public realm, but what is going to be most beneficial? If it's the city and we're really talking about making positive energy effects, then I don't need another restaurant shed in the street bed. I would greening the city in any particular ways, if possible, depending on what the subsurface is and everything else that comes with it. Any opportunity to have that makes a major difference for pedestrian safety, for cloudbursts, for everything that comes with it that we aren't looking at necessarily tied together. So my question for you is, how will this City of Yes and this amendment take those aspects into consideration to truly do something that makes it greener, makes it cleaner first, as the first priority?
Thank you, Tammy. And I think you bring up a lot of good points about, you know, like how our uses end up, you know, like you mentioned, competing with each other, and sometimes they are for the benefit of, you know, financial reasons or convenience reasons, and not necessarily for the public good. So I think that's a really bigger question that I can bring back to each of the 3 teams for them to kind of think through that and almost use as like a criteria when they're thinking through their research topics.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. Michael Kramer, then Laura, and Lucian.
All right, 2 questions. The first question is, by making the incentives for senior housing equal to the incentives for affordable housing, is the unintended consequence that you're going to have fewer senior housing units built. And in my experience, there are lots of homeless who would be housed in those senior housing units.
So just to reiterate, you're asking about maybe like unintended consequences from giving incentives to senior housing, because there might be a concern over it not ending up being built to begin with or being used for other uses.
Basically, you're disincentivizing the developer from doing senior housing and incentivizing them to do affordable housing. And is that an unintended consequence? And have you studied the homeless population that we're trying to house?
Thank you. I'll bring that back to our housing team to see how they're thinking through that, and like, of course, like those unintended impacts and consequences of like the work that they're trying to do. Because I know on paper it might sound good, but I'm pretty sure they're trying to research kind of like all those impacts. So I will bring that back to the team for them to study further.
Okay, and then my question about the charging stations. Are you contemplating putting, for lack of a better word, sidewalk charging stations where it's accessible from the roadbed? And then the question becomes, is that a profit center for the residential building or the commercial building that's in front of those charging stations?
When it comes to the roadbed, that is something that DOT is mainly the keeper of like the roadbed. So really our zoning text will really affect the buildings themselves. So not so much like the actual roadbeds.
Well, there are cities that have charging stations on the sidewalk that are reachable from the roadbed and even 90-degree angles or something like that. And, that could be, an incentive for a condo, or, I mean, it's sort of like, how are we using the roadbeds again?
Yeah.
Instead of doing outdoor dining, maybe the cars are dining on electricity.
That's a great example. Thank you.
Well, and it's an incentive for the condo or the commercial property owner to have it in front of their building.
Yeah, that is a good point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of condos would go for that. Laura, and then Lucian, Tammy, your hand is up again.
Okay. Thank you. So this is obviously a very ambitious initiative. I guess, I'm speaking from the perspective of a landscape architect who's worked on a lot of resilience projects around the city. And it just seems to me that there may not be one zoning or one policy that covers every situation in the city when it comes to making the city greener, because, some areas are in former tidal marsh areas like East Harlem, and they have a different problem than an upland area where there's bedrock, and so the need for redeploying our open space, specifically our streets, let's say in East Harlem, to create not just like bioswales, but like major stormwater, handling mechanisms it's completely different up there than in Lower Manhattan, where we've either got Manhattan schist or subway systems or infrastructure. I mean, there really is almost no place to put, to absorb stormwater here. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think when it comes to the kind of green infrastructure and, flood issues and things like that, it really has to be more nuanced than a blanket solution. Does that make sense to you?
It does, and I really appreciate you thinking through that. Like, you're right. Things that go on in like you mentioned, Harlem aren't the exact issues that are going on in Lower Manhattan. And same thing for the outer boroughs. Things that happen in Queens aren't the same issues that happen in like
Right.
the Bronx.
Along those lines, like those of us who live in Community Board 1, we're blessed with amazing transportation infrastructure and grocery stores and all sorts of things. We're not blessed with lots of huge parks, but there in the outer boroughs, there's like, when you talk about reducing parking spots and buildings and cars and things, like what would facilitate that would be better public transportation, like reducing the transportation desert aspects of some, you know, far-flung communities and also the food desert nature of those places. So I think that, you know, the zoning needs to really think very holistically about this, because if people don't have a way to move around, it's hard to take their cars away. It's not really fair. So I just wanted to make a pitch for that. And then finally, you know, as the city gets greener with green infrastructure, like how closely are you coordinating with Parks and DOT and DEP to have these programs be successful? And I say that from the point of view of having seen really like a real lack of interdepartmental coordination on my projects. So I'm just wondering how much true coordination and buy-in there is between the agencies on this.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's to your point. I think that's very fair to have that concern. I just know from what they've presented to us that they have been having, specifically, I know they've been especially coordinating with DEP because, you know, a lot of this does go hand in hand with their work. But we can have that team talk more about kind of like their interagency kind of work program in that next info session, because I think that is something that's important to everybody to make sure that we're all coordinated and it's not just us kind of making up these plans and the rest of the agencies don't really know what's going on.
Well, DEP owns, I think, the most public real estate in the city. So if they're not on board, it's pretty hard to do.
Yeah.
You know, they really own us. I forget, I researched this a couple of years ago, but it's a huge amount of our open space is paved streets, which is
Yeah.
a big part of our resiliency problem, our heat island effect, and all sorts of stuff.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
it's our biggest
24%.
resource.
And then I think just to really quickly touch upon like your first comment, that's really something that like it wasn't so much like in our presentation, but like we are trying to think through the equity portion of all three initiatives in the sense of like how you just mentioned that some of these initiatives really need to touch on like the different issues throughout every borough because, you know, for example, the Bronx definitely has issues with their highways and the trucks that go in and out of them, and the children are the ones who end up with the high asthma rates and things like that. And so, and you're right, there are areas, you know, in the outer boroughs that don't have that kind of rich transportation. So taking away cars just as a pitch-all solution really isn't the most equitable solution. So, you know, thank you for bringing that up. And it's something the team is thinking about how to equitably, you know, roll out these three initiatives.
I mean, in my mind, it's not under so much the category of equity as it is doing the right thing in the right place. Like it's New York is a huge, diverse city geographically and ecologically, and so, you know, the idea of it's like I don't think you're going to have a one size fits all solution when it comes to land use in New York, and I think trying to do that is not a good idea, actually.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great comment for me to bring back.
There's some areas where there shouldn't be building at all. I'm sorry, but you know, there's areas, you know, that are right in the tidal zone where like those shouldn't be upzoned. I'm sorry. Right? Like we have to start being smarter about where we're building.
Thank you, Laura.
Okay.
Thanks, Laura. Lucian, and then Tammy, I see your hands up again.
Thank you, Patrick. Jasmine, Ariel, thank you so much for this presentation. Laura, I think the number that I recall is 24% of the cities under the jurisdiction of DOT as public right of way, but I'll have to check that number, but I think that's around what it is. I have three questions for you, for your team, Jasmine. First is, I'd like to note that the timing of the punitive elements of Local Law 97, the unlocking of the Inflation Reduction Act funds, and the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA's retrofit program, are kind of going to be happening around the same time. There are some very exciting NYSERDA retrofit programs that do benefit tall, large-scale buildings as well as mid-rise buildings. So this district is certainly could benefit. I think if certain things are unlocked. So I definitely see where DCP is looking in that respect. But in terms of your sister agency, Department of Buildings and building code reform, do you think that is this something that you've been speaking with them in terms of moving in lockstep with how they revise their building code to permit more buildings to take advantage of environmental retrofits and solar panels? One example that I'll use is that mid-rise buildings can't use ballast solar panels, which forces them to have to puncture the roof membrane to affix the solar panels, which makes a lot of them say, no thanks, we don't want to have roof leaks. Is this something that you think there's going to be a corresponding update to the building code?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the example because that's good for me to at least be able to like ground my conversation with the team going back. I'll bring that to them and see how they kind of, I think it's going back to kind of like our interagency coordination and kind of work plan with them on like exactly what they're thinking through together. So I'll make sure that it's a big point that they can bring up during like the next info session.
Thanks, and I'm very excited about the potential for NYSERDA to be active in our district for once. The second is a question of scale. You mentioned the energy storage, the battery energy storage. This is also important for facilities that rely on huge diesel generators. For example, we have a couple of these in our district. They rely on huge diesel generators to kick on if there's any kind of power loss or a brownout. 60 Hudson's a really good example of that, where you have a lot of residential units surrounding an enormous telecom building. And if the power were to go out, you would have 50 huge diesel generators kick on all at once. But even when there's not an emergency, they're required to test them and run them. And I think there's enormous air quality and quality of life impacts that come from that. They would benefit enormously from converting their diesel backups, at least in part, if they couldn't do it fully, to electric battery storage. However, the question is, if your text amendments are going to allow that sort of scale to occur. So I would really push you all to use 60 Hudson as a test case to see if your zoning text amendments would allow a use like that to be able to trigger those benefits. The third.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Sure. The third is about the accessory parking. We recently, our transportation committee debated on a proposal by the Manhattan Borough President about how to improve last mile deliveries. This is especially important in Lower Manhattan. You've heard a couple of people talk about narrow streets, historic streets. It really does make a mess of throughput and traffic. One item was, his proposal was allowing accessory parking garages to be used for the distribution, like the last mile distribution, where you'd have, whatever vehicle can fit within an enclosed garage space, then kind of break it up there into the last mile carts where people are kind of dragging the package, or they have like the cart, instead of using the public right of way, using the sidewalk, using public spaces, pops, whatever, what have you. If you're opening the book to changing the text on accessory garage uses, that would certainly be something to include while you're in there. And my question for you is, have you had any discussions with the Manhattan Borough President about including those, since there would be direct benefits to zero carbon by reforming that?
Yeah, thanks so much for giving me all those examples, because I think that really helps like ground our conversations when we talk to our zero carbon team, especially the example of 60 Hudson. I think that'll be really helpful for me, for them to look into and thinking through, like you mentioned, like as a test case to see how our zoning text kind of affects what they already have, and if that's the kind of bulk that might go into other buildings. Because I know one thing that they are thinking through is kind of specific those questions: how big, how much. So it is something they're thinking through right now as they're working through the actual text. And so it's definitely something that we can bring back to them to make sure that it's, they're looking at like size and density when it comes to the batteries. And And I think for accessory parking, it's another thing that we'll bring back to them. I know they are having conversations with the borough president around these 3 text amendments, and I know they've had frequent meetings with them. But I don't know if this has been brought up particularly just yet. So I'll check in with them to make sure that it's something that they're having conversations around.
Thank you so much, Jasmine.
Yeah.
That's all, Patrick.
Thanks, Lucian. Tammy?
And I think as we're having retrofit conversations, we also need to take a look at the future. And when we're looking at the East Side development and Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency, they are actually building brand new buildings and then doing some adaptive reuse. But one of the things that we've been chatting with them about was when taking a look at that, for example, finding ways to get your water pumps into the water pump facility built within the ferry terminals. So it doesn't have to be another piece of real estate. And much like other places in the world, find a way to use it as perhaps a educational driver as well, that you can come to one place and see all of that happening, whether that's the Governor's Island ferry building that they're building or others. The other things that we've had long conversations with them about is maximizing public benefit in realm, because all of the plans have a commercial aspect. There is no public realm benefit other than the connecting parks that they are looking to do in between. And I hazard to say at this point, I'm not sure how many of us in Lower Manhattan are super excited about a park right by the heliport again. Because the heliport, we understand, is not going anywhere. And if everything is commercialized, then I'm looking at saying, when you're looking, and Ariel's talking about the building and the roofs and things like that, we're looking at potential different usages of the roof, right? Beyond solar panels, which we all think, many of us think is a great idea. Not all, I don't know. I assume majority of us. But we also want to see fields up top. We want to see community use space up top. I'm not looking for another rooftop, pier top concert venue. I'm looking for a ball field. I'm looking for picnic areas. I'm looking for public realm benefit of active and recreational parks and the connection therein to, again, green the city and bring in more public space. And I think that if we don't offer an opportunity to find a way to do all of that, then we are losing in some aspects. So that's something that I would caution to make sure that is included in the conversations, especially for the lower buildings. Whether you love Pier 40 or not, I use that as a great example of an asset and an amenity that I can't imagine New York City without. So we have an opportunity to build that out on the east side, but if we're only thinking of the rooftops in terms of energy and roof, then we're not thinking of public benefit and to the best that we can.
Thank you so much, Tammy. And I'm also, again, really grateful that everyone's been giving me such great examples, especially grounded in Lower Manhattan. I think this is incredibly useful and helpful. So thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Colin, you were up and then you're down. Okay. Going once, going twice. I see no one in the attendee section. So with that, Jasmine, Ariel, Colin got in for the last question.
Yeah, I was just trying to applaud. I'm sorry. And
Oh,
never mind.
okay.
Yay, thanks, Tammy. That's all.
All right. Jasmine, Ariel, thank you both so much. We look forward to hearing more, especially after you get a little bit of feedback on these really great, thoughtful points that everyone has talked about tonight. This was really a great discussion, committee members. So thank you so much for it. That's the only thing we have on our agenda, so we're adjourned. We'll see you all at the full board.
Thanks.
Happy
Jasmine.
holidays, Jasmine, Ariel. Thank you for
you.
coming.
Thank
Have
you
a great
everyone.
night.
Good
Bye.
night.